In this video, we are going to discuss 5 critical chess endgames that every player must know if they really want to improve their chess endgame skills, or I can say basically overall improving their chess knowledge. So after watching this video, by the end of the video, your endgame knowledge is going to be increased by 100%. So I don't want to waste any further time, so let's start. So we have the first position on our board. We are playing with the white pieces. Try to pause the video and try to think. You are white, the position looks blocked. How are you going to continue the position in this position from the white side? Okay, so what's happening in this position? It looks like a blocked position, though white's queen and the knight looks better compared to the black's queen and the knight. Okay, though it looks like a block position. You will realize that white's queen and the knight are perfectly placed, but the king on g2 is kind of not really playing an essential role in the game of chess. Like, he's kind of passive. In the endgame, we should try to get all our pieces into attacking. So if we found the move f3, that's a brilliant move. After f3, in the game we had gf3. So here black should have played knight d8. Why? So that black can protect the pawn with the knight, and now the black queen is free to go. Okay, so now here white have to take on g4, queen f1 and a queen e3. White have to defend the b3 pawn. Knight comes here, and here this pawn is hanging, so black played knight g5. So white goes back with the knight to d3, queen goes over here, and the position is kind of even after queen d1, stopping queen f3, and the position is even, nothing is happening, and it's a draw. Okay, but instead black decided to take over here. Take, and it actually kind of looks pretty unnatural. Black is not really ruining up its pawn structure, and at the first glance it looks like white's pawn structure is a bit bad now. But after king into f3, black decided to play knight d8. We have knight f8, and here we have king c7. So basically, black have to move the king now, because now the black's knight and the queen are tied up to protect the pawn on e6, and white is simply attacking the pawn. So black is having the only hope of moving the king. Now we have king g2, and now you will realize what is the idea of fight. So now after king g2, white's idea is to get the king in, like this, and then trade off the queen, and you will realize then it's completely winning for white. How? Because now the white king is much more active, and the pawn is falling apart, and it's a win. So after king g2, now we have king to c8. Here black should have made some counterplay with b5, takes king b6, and trying to generate some counterplay with takes, and getting the king over here trying to push his a pawn. But instead black decided to play king c8, just waiting. And here this is a position, and this is an endgame that you must know. You should try to create something from nothing, because we are playing humans, not the engine. So we have king b6, king h4, black is just waiting up, king over here, king goes to h4 back. And here in this position, if black tries to capture the pawn over here, queen e7 is already winning. Okay, queen e7 is already winning, you move it, it's a check, and you lose the knight, it's winning. Okay, so you can't take on g3, so that's why king c8, the king goes back, the king comes in front. Now here once again black could have pushed b5 and tried to get his king, but instead black played king c7, just holding on to the position. Now a white knight came back, queen to d7. If king c8, already knight e5, the pawn push, now already queen g7, the white's queen is coming on a7, so takes, knight goes to c6, covering the a7 square, knight goes to d3, and the position is at least better for white, because the knight is jumping on c5. There are lots of weak squares into the black's camp. Black king is also a bit weak, white is definitely better. Instead we have queen d7, so we have now knight e5, it's a check, king g5, king goes back, because if you try to play queen g8 check, I can simply play king h6, and now there are no more checks, queen is coming to g7, and it's completely winning. So we have king c8, queen g6, queen here, because if black tries to trade off the queen, it's losing, because white king is already very near to the pawn. So black tries to keeping the queen on the board, and now it's a fourth queen trade, and it's completely winning now. King g7, knight to f7, a brilliant move, I would say. Now you'll realize black is not really having any other move. The knight can't really go anywhere, because if the knight goes anywhere, I can simply take over here, king goes over here, and eventually the pawn is starting to collapse. If you move the king, you're losing the pawn, and even if you try to push the pawn, I can simply get the king, changing nothing, and this pawn is falling apart, and I can make the queen and win the game. So that's why The king is forced to move, and now the king goes to f6. It's a check, knight goes over here, and now it's a zugzwang. You lose everything. Like, you have to move the king or the knight, but then I can simply take out the e6 pawn, the f5 pawn, and make the queen, and it's over. So this was a very instructive endgame, I would say, like basically creating something from absolutely nothing. Many times we have a block position and we agree to a draw, but try to get all your pieces, try to get some kind of ideas that you can maybe get into the game, and that's how you can create something from nothing. Absolutely, yeah, activating your king and winning the game. So this was the first diagram, a very instructive one. So now let's move on to the second diagram. Okay, so we have the second diagram on the board. Let me flip the board. We are playing with the black pieces. It's black to play. Try to pause the video and try to think, how are you going to continue the position if you're playing with the black pieces? Okay, so it looks like black should be lost because the knight is very active. The white's king is also very active. The bishop is passive. It should be losing. So here, if found the move king c6, bravo, that's the best move. Why? Because first of all, if you try to make a random move like bishop g8, you will realize that after knight b7, now if you try to get the king over here trying to capture these pawns, white can put the knight to d6, and your king is kind of blocked in, and knight's already losing after bishop h7. The king moves, the king can come over here, the knight attacks the bishop moves, now king a6. So now basically the bishop is blocked up. You have to move the king, but knight's already losing after knight f7, knight f7, bishop goes over here, knight e6, bishop h7, knight check, and basically the knight goes to f6 and you lose the bishop. That's it. You lose the game. So that's why this is a completely winning position for white. That's why bishop g8 is already not the best way to play. So here, black should play king to c6, and if you found this move, congratulations. Now the point here is after knight b7, king b5, knight check, the king goes to b4. And it looks like black is just losing a piece, but black is kind of on time to capture this pawn and try to push his d pawn. Pushing the d pawn, and now we have knight d6. So if you now try to push the pawn, it's already a blunder after knight c4 check, and white can sack the knight for the pawn and try to push this pawn into a win, and it's a winning position for white. So instead, we play king d4, stopping the knight, and now black can make the queen, and this position is a draw. It looks like white is going to make the queen, but here check, queen goes over here, capturing the knight, and it still looks, many people think that it's a losing endgame for black, but it's a draw. After king g7, we can simply put our king to b2. The question is why we put the king to b2, because white is having the g pawn. So whenever the pawn reaches on g7, we can start checking the white king, and there won't be any moment where white is going to block the queen check and at the same time going to check the black king, because already this diagonal is already blocked by the pawn. So for example, what I'm trying to convey here is, we have this position and white put the pawn on g7. This is a draw because, like, if I, for example, if I give a check, white tries to stop it, there is no single moment where the queen is giving a check and the check is blocked, and also at the same time white is also threatening a check and also trading off the queen, which is the only scenario where white can win. Okay, so here there won't be any checks, so here black can just keep checking and it's a draw. There is no way white can escape this. So just put the king to b2, just diagonal to the pawn, and it's a draw. So this was the second diagram, very interesting one. Many people don't know how to stop this endgame, how to draw this endgame, but a very interesting one. We are basically creating some chances from nothing, and yeah, this is the power of the endgame. So yeah, this was the second diagram. So now let's move on to the third diagram. Okay, so we have the third diagram on our board. This time, once again, we are playing with the black pieces. Try to pause the video and try to think what is happening in this position and how should black try to continue this position. Okay, so what's happening? So first of all, white has a pawn up. White's idea is to get the king. Try to push this pawn into a queen and it's winning. So first of all, if you try to capture the pawn on g3, not the best way, because white can already play some sort of an h5. If you try to block it once again, okay, the engine says it's a draw, but after rook d5, the things are getting hard for black. The king is going to get the king, white is going to get the king, try to push this pawn, and it's hard for black to get a draw. Instead, the best way here, you need to realize that the rook is pretty active, but your king is not really active. In the end game, you should get all your pieces at the best square, activating all your pieces. So you must try to find the move king to g6. And after king g6, your idea is to play king h5, followed by king g4, activating your king. So now we have king to b2, and now you grab the pawn, because you have already realized that after king h5, a6, you are having rook g6. This is a very deep idea. And if you found this move, congratulations. Rook g6, you attack the pawn, a7. And now basically black simply stops it. Okay. So if white tries to play rook a4 and it looks like a losing position, but here we can give a check, stop the pawn push, and now we can already capture this pawn. Try to push our h pawn and it's already a draw position. A very easy draw. So here that's why a7, putting the rook on d7. And here there are many ways to win, but the best way I personally liked was to play g7. Okay. You give up the h7 pawn, and now you capture, okay, you simply go back with the rook. You capture this pawn, and now you are starting to push your f pawn, and this position is just a draw. Both the players are making the queen at the same time. And if you don't make the queen, it's still a draw. Because why, you ask? Because like for example, the king goes over here, here, here. We can already go over here. Because it's a take and it's a draw. It's a stalemate, yeah. So that's why this is the best way to make the draw. And if you try to push the, if you don't really push and you try to capture the pawn directly, it's still a draw, but you need some hard work. The h pawn is pushing up, but it's still bad because white king is getting in and black have to play a bit precisely. And if you go king g4, white can still take over here, still h5, and I don't know what is happening. White is having 2 pawns, black is having 1 pawn. The possession is a bit complex, so that's why I personally feel g6 is the best way. You give up the pawn, and now you can start pushing your this pawn, and it's a draw. It's a simple draw, that's it. So this was the third position, a very interesting one. This is how you protect the endgame. Even if you are a pawn down, activate your king, and you can make the draw. So this was the third position, so now let's move on to the fourth position. Okay, so we have the fourth position on our board. Again, this time we are playing with the black pieces. The material is even, but many things are happening up. Pause the video and try to think what is happening in this position and how should black try to continue this position. Try to take your own time. Okay, so here black should play the move. First of all, what's happened? So white is trying to push his a pawn, and it looks like the rook is already behind the pawn, and it looks like it's pretty hard for black to hold it. Okay, first of all, you can't push the pawn because white is just much faster. White is much faster. Okay, so here the question is how will you stop the pawn? If you try to get the king near, for example, king e8, you are not really on time because white is going to make the queen and it's a check and black is losing. So here black must play the move rook to e6, a very interesting move and the best move. What is the idea? If a5, we stop it, the king comes here, and now we can stop everything. First g6, protecting everything, and now we can even try to push our c pawn. Basically, here the king is on time to capture the pawn. And after c5, you can also try to generate your own counterplay. This is the draw position. So here white should try to play king f2. White is activating his own king. Now we play rook a6, the king comes here, and now we get our own king over here, and now we play rook f5, a very interesting one. So here, why we play rook f5? Because after rook f5, you are kind of not allowing white to enter to the 5th rank. You need to basically put your pieces at the best activated square, where they can control many of the things. After rook f5, white tries to get the king, and now we get the king to d7. And kind of you can realize now the black king is on time to stop this pawn. So after king b4, now black can simply go away with the rook. Push, and now the king is on time. After a7 check, we can hide the king. So here white tries to play rook c1, and here have rook to e2, activating the rook. Pawn push check, and now we play the move king a8, a very sharp move. We do not take because after take, white can take on g7. Engine says it's a draw, but practically human-wise, it's pretty hard for black to draw this game. But instead king e8, that's it. And after rook c7, just capture the g2 pawn. It's a draw. Black's having 3 pawns. Okay, this pawn can't really become a queen, and white can't really checkmate because we are always having this back rank check. We can always check him from behind. So it's a draw. That's it. It's a pretty easy draw for black. So yeah, this is how you play this. Like, you need to realize that if you simply passive your rook, it is completely losing, because then white is going to get his own king and start pushing his pawn. You need to use your king to stop this pawn and then activate your rook to capture these pawns. That will help you to get the best position and help you to get the half point, like draw the game. So this is how you play the fourth position, the fourth diagram. So now let's move on to the fifth and the final diagram of the day. Okay, so we have the final and the fifth diagram on the board. We are playing with the white pieces. Try to pause the video and try to think, how are you going to continue the position if you're playing with the white pieces? What's happening? Okay, so what's happening in this position? How should we play? So here, first of all, you will realize that white's king is much active than the black king. And here, white is already having a pass pawn on the b file. So first of all, definitely white is the one playing for the win. That's pretty easy. And here you need to realize, like, what is the plan of black? Black wants to activate his king. How? Black wants to get the king near to the pawn, try to stop this pawn. So here, first of all, if you found the move b5, it's a good move. This is exactly the move that is required. Then goes back, and now we play a very interesting move, which is knight d5. Why we play knight d5? Because the d5 knight covers the e7 square, not allowing the black king to activate itself. Okay, and now the idea is pretty clear for white. White can put the bishop on e4. Maybe just move the knight, push this pawn, and eventually trade off the bishops and try to make this pawn into a queen. And the king, whereas the king is doing nothing, just blocked in. If the black moves the knight, white king is already entering. So here after knight d5, black push the pawn to f6 and it's a check. So try to pause the video and try to think, how are you going to continue this position? Okay, so after f6 check, this was a very good move. Very good try, I would say, though white is still winning. This game was played between Nigel's shot from the white side and black side. I can't really recall. But after f6, here the best way is to simply take on f6, which is winning. Though it requires calculation a bit. Like, the basic point here is after knight f6 takes, bishop f5, protecting this pawn, and after king moves, now we can push the pawn to b6, making a cage, invisible wall, that black can't really enter on. And here white is going to capture this pawn and eventually make the queen. That's it. Okay, so it's winning. So here, going back a bit, if black tries to capture on g2, now you can still push the pawn, and now the idea is to play bishop e4, stopping this bishop and make the queen. So black have to go back, but now we can trade off the knight and play bishop e4, and this position is winning. Our king is much more activated, and we can eventually use our h pawn to win the game. That's it. So here, this is the best way, but everyone who thought king e6, it looks like after king e6, we are activating your own king, and this move was exactly played by Nigel Short. It's pretty clear that he wants to push the pawn, he wants to get his own king, he can protect the knight, activate his king, and it's completely winning. But what he missed was bishop c8. And it's not a check, but it's actually a mate. Can you believe it? Like, at the first glance, when I was solving this puzzle, even I didn't realize that it was a mate. I simply missed it. The reason is why we missed it, because our brain thinks that there are so less pieces on the board, it is nearly impossible for black to mate the white king, because there are so many less pieces. But that's the thing, this is a checkmate, and you need to understand this, that it's a checkmate. You should never overpress the position, or else you can have something like this. And this has happened many times in the chess history, and it is happening in the future and also in the present. So yeah, this is what you need to realize, and knight f6 was completely winning. You just need to understand this is winning. You can capture this pawn, and you need to keep this pawn, because if black is able to capture the pawn, this is already a draw, because it's the wrong squared queening pawn. So basically you can just take over here, get the bishop in between, and it's basically a win for white. It's a win. So this was the fifth position, a very interesting one. Understanding that you should not allow your opponent to activate his pieces. This is the reason white played knight d5. And yeah, just don't blunder the stuff like checkmate. That's it. So this was all the 5 diagrams that we covered in this video. Well, guys, if you learned anything new today, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. And if you want anything on any particular topic, make sure to tell me in the comment section below, and I'm definitely going to come up with that particular video. So thank you for watching, and I'm going to see you soon. So bye bye.